I was 10 feet from the bakery counter when I heard the woman lower her voice and ask, "Do you have any birthday cakes about to expire? Something you could sell for a few dollars?" The clerk glanced at the clock, then at the little purse in her hands. "We throw them out tomorrow," he said, "but tonight they're full price." She nodded as if he had apologized, though he hadn't. Then she counted 3 crumpled bills and whispered, "It's my daughter's 8th birthday." I should have kept walking. I was anonymously inspecting a supplier and wanted to stay unnoticed, but when the woman turned away, I saw a child waiting beyond the glass doors, hugging a paper crown and trying not to look disappointed. 10 minutes later, I carried the prettiest cake in the case into the parking lot, along with candles and a small bunch of daisies. What made the woman cry was not the price. It was the sentence I had asked the decorator to write across the icing. Before I tell you what it said, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. When does helping a stranger become a responsibility instead of a choice? The sentence was simple. Ruby, you deserve a truly happy day. The woman stood beside an aging blue minivan under the yellow parking lot lights. She had one hand on the driver's door and the other pressed to her mouth. Up close, she looked younger than I had first thought, maybe 25, with tired brown eyes and flour caught in the seam of her dark coat sleeve. The girl behind the glass lifted her paper crown when she saw the cake. "I think this belongs to you," I said. The woman stared at the pink buttercream roses. "I can't take that." "You can," I said. "It's already paid for." "No, I mean, I really can't. I don't know you." "My name is Mason." I set the flowers on the hood so she would not have to choose between accepting them and protecting her pride. "You asked for a discounted cake." I happened to hear. That's the whole story. She looked through the windshield at her daughter, then back at the message. Her face held steady until she read it a second time. Tears slipped down before she could turn away. "I'm sorry," she said, brushing them off quickly. "It's been a long week." "You don't have to explain." The girl pushed open the passenger door. A thin plastic hospital bracelet circled her wrist. "Mom, is that for me?" The woman closed her eyes for 1 second, then smiled in a way that seemed to cost her something. "Yes, Ruby, it is." Ruby climbed down carefully. She was small for 8, with a purple knit cap pulled low over her ears and a red cardigan buttoned wrong at the bottom. She read the message out loud, placing one finger beneath each word. When she reached "Happy Day," she looked at me. "Did you know today wasn't happy yet?" she asked. "I guessed it needed a better ending." "That's smart." She considered the daisies. "Are those for Mom?" "Nobody gives Mom flowers." Her mother made a soft, embarrassed sound. "Ruby." "What?" "It's true." I handed the flowers over. "Then they're overdue." The woman accepted them at last. "Grace," she said. "My name is Grace Bell." I helped her slide the cake onto the minivan's back seat. There were 2 grocery bags inside. Canned soup, rice, apples, and a package of discount candles that were too wide for a cake. A folded blanket covered a portable oxygen unit. I did not ask about it. Grace noticed where I was looking and moved the blanket higher. "Thank you," she said, more firmly now. "I mean it, but I don't want Ruby growing up believing strangers are supposed to rescue us." "Neither do I." She studied me, as if that answer mattered more than the cake. Ruby tugged on my sleeve. "We're eating it at home. You can have 1 piece because you wrote on it." Grace started to object, but I said, "1 piece sounds fair." Their apartment was above a coin laundry 6 blocks away. It was small and warm, filled with second-hand furniture, medical folders, and the clean smell of vanilla. Ruby placed 8 mismatched candles into the cake, and Grace lit them from the stove. When Ruby made her wish, she did not close her eyes. She looked directly at her mother. After she blew out the candles, Grace cut 3 slices with a bread knife. The supermarket cake was too sweet and slightly dry, but Ruby ate it as if it had come from a palace. Halfway through, she pushed the frosting rose toward Grace. "You get this one," she said. "You had a worse day." Grace laughed, and for the first time I saw the woman she might have been before exhaustion became a permanent part of her face. I left after 20 minutes. At the door, Grace put a paper plate wrapped in foil into my hands. "For tomorrow," she said. "There's already cake on it." "That's not from the store." Beneath the foil sat a small square of honey almond cake, pale gold and still warm. One bite in the hallway stopped me cold. The crumb was tender, the edges caramelized, and the almond carried a faint note of orange. It tasted almost exactly like the cake that had saved my first restaurant 7 years earlier. Back then, I had been 22, broke, and 3 days from closing a 12-table restaurant in Milwaukee. During a snowstorm, a middle-aged woman watched me argue with a supplier, then entered my kitchen and made an almond cake from what remained. She told me to serve it warm with honey, pressed $200 into my hand for ingredients, and wrote the recipe on an invoice. She signed it E. Bell. The cake became our signature dessert. Reviews mentioned it. Customers returned for it. That one recipe bought me enough time to turn a failing restaurant into the first location of Reed & Rowe, which now operated 17 restaurants across 3 states. I stood outside Grace's apartment holding the foil-covered plate and feeling the past open beneath my feet. The next morning I returned to the supermarket in my usual clothes. The bakery clerk recognized me only after the store manager hurried over and called me Mr. Reed. The clerk's face changed. I did not enjoy that part. My company bought specialty bread and desserts from the supermarket's regional commissary, and I had been inspecting quality without announcing myself. I asked the manager about the previous night. He immediately offered to fire the clerk. "Don't," I said. "Train him." A policy can be correct and still be carried out without humiliating someone. Then I bought a box of plain pastries and drove to Grace's building. She opened the door wearing an apron dusted with flour. Behind her, cooling racks covered the kitchen table. Ruby sat on the couch doing math homework beside the oxygen machine. Grace looked at my coat, my watch, and the black sedan at the curb. "You're not a grocery store employee." "No." "Who are you?" I told her. She stepped into the hallway and pulled the door nearly closed. "You own Reed & Rowe?" "Yes." "And you let me invite you into my apartment without saying that?" "I didn't think my job mattered last night." "It matters this morning." Her voice was not angry so much as guarded. I understood. Money changes the shape of every generous act. What looks like kindness from one side can feel like control from the other. "I came because of the cake you gave me," I said. "Where did you learn to make it?" "My mother." "What was her name?" Grace hesitated. "Eleanor Bell." The hallway seemed to narrow. "Did she ever live in Milwaukee?" "For a few years. Why?" I told her about the snowstorm, the recipe, and the $200. Grace listened without interrupting. When I described the orange note in the almond batter, her fingers tightened around the edge of the door. "That was her," she said. "She always said almond needs something bright or it tastes like a locked room." I laughed once, because those were almost the exact words Eleanor had used. Grace's expression softened, then changed again. "So what do you want?" "To thank the right person, even if I'm 7 years late. She died 4 years ago." "I'm sorry." Grace looked through the narrow opening at Ruby. She would have liked knowing the restaurant survived. "I want you to see it." "What?" "The original place. The invoice with her recipe is framed in my office." Grace shook her head. "I can't leave Ruby alone." "Bring her." "She has appointments. Then another day." I held out the pastry box. "No strings." She did not take it. People with money say that when they haven't noticed the strings yet. I set the box on the floor between us. "Then you can decide later whether to pick it up." As I turned toward the stairs, Ruby called from inside. "Mom, are you being stubborn again?" Grace closed her eyes. "Do your fractions." I finished them. "Check them. They're still right." I heard Grace trying not to laugh. When I reached the bottom step, she called my name. "One visit," she said, "and we drive ourselves." 3 days later, Grace and Ruby came to my first restaurant. I had kept the original brick wall, crooked bar, and scar where an oven wheel burned the floor. Ruby touched everything as if it belonged in a museum. In my office, the framed invoice hung beside the first newspaper review. Eleanor's handwriting had faded from blue to gray. Grace raised her hand toward the glass but stopped before touching it. "That's her capital B." Ruby read the note at the bottom. "Feed people as though they may be carrying a hunger you cannot see." "That sounds like Grandma," she said. Grace turned away. I gave her time. When she faced me again, she had rebuilt the wall in her expression. "My mother helped a lot of people. You don't owe us because you became successful." "I know." "Do you?" "I'm trying to." Ruby wandered toward the kitchen where my pastry chef, Lena Ortiz, was torching sugar on custards. Grace watched the motion with an attention so precise it was almost physical. "You bake professionally," I said. "I used to." "Where?" "At Bell and Hearth in Oak Park." I knew the name. Before Eleanor's death, Bell and Hearth had been one of the best neighborhood bakeries outside Chicago. Now it sold expensive wedding cakes that tasted like refrigerator air. "My mother left it to me," Grace said. "At least, that's what I believed." "What happened?" "My Uncle Walter produced a partnership agreement saying she had transferred controlling ownership to him. The signature looked real. The witnesses backed him. Then money disappeared from the business account, and he told everyone I took it before I left." "Did you?" Her stare sharpened. "No," I said. "That came out wrong." "I mean, was there an investigation?" "There was an accusation. That was enough. Walter filed a civil claim, then offered to drop it if I signed away my interest. Ruby had just been diagnosed. My husband, Daniel, had died 6 months earlier. I had no money for court and no strength for another fight." Ruby was laughing in the kitchen as Lena showed her how to crack an egg with one hand. "What is Ruby's diagnosis?" I asked. "Congenital heart disease. She needs a corrective surgery soon. We're waiting for the hospital to confirm the date and insurance coverage." I wanted to say I would pay for it. The sentence rose quickly because money was the tool I knew how to use. Grace must have seen it coming. "Don't," she said. I stopped. "I won't let my daughter's illness become the reason someone owns a piece of my life." "Understood." She looked surprised that I did not argue. "What would help?" I asked. "A job I earned, a fair chance to clear my name, and enough time to be Ruby's mother." Those were not requests for rescue, they were terms. I asked Lena to bring us 3 plated desserts from the lunch menu. I told Grace we were redesigning the pastry program for all 17 restaurants and needed a consultant for 6 weeks. That part was true. I had been dissatisfied with the menu for months. I offered a fixed contract, child care reimbursement during scheduled hours, and no obligation beyond the project. Grace read every line twice. "I want the right to reject changes to my recipes if they damage the quality," she said. "Agreed." "I want my name on anything I create." "Agreed." "And I want to know whether you're hiring me because of my mother." "Your mother got you in the room," I said. "Your cake decides whether you stay." For the first time, Grace smiled directly at me. "That's fair." The next 6 weeks changed my restaurants and the rhythm of my life. Grace worked 3 nights a week after Ruby's appointments. She moved without wasted motion, listened to dough by tapping the bowl, and judged butter by its shine. She was patient with apprentices and merciless with shortcuts. On her second night, she tasted our chocolate tart and said, "This crust is afraid of salt." Lena folded her arms. "Crust doesn't feel fear." "This one does." They argued for 15 minutes, then remade it together. The new version sold out the next weekend. Grace never performed gratitude. She challenged invoices, rejected poor fruit, and told me before 3 managers that my dessert rollout was a spreadsheet pretending to be a menu. She was right. I scheduled site visits around her test bakes and pretended it was coincidence. Ruby sat nearby with hospital forms and a fox-shaped backpack, serving as official taster until she tired. One night after Ruby fell asleep in my office, Grace and I glazed pear cakes at 1 a.m. Snow pressed against the windows. The kitchen had gone quiet except for the refrigerator motors. "You could go home," Grace said. "So could you." "I'm being paid. I own the place." "That is not the same as working." I handed her a clean brush. "You have strong opinions about owners." "I have experience." She said it lightly, but her shoulders changed. I asked about Walter. Grace kept brushing glaze over the pears. "He was my mother's younger brother. He handled taxes and vendor contracts. After she became ill, he started telling her the bakery was too much for me. He said I was distracted by Daniel and Ruby. Mom argued with him, but she was on medication. The week after the funeral, Walter showed me the agreement." "Do you have a copy?" "Only a scan. He kept the original." "Would you let an attorney review it?" Her hand stopped. "Your attorney?" "One who works for you. I pay the initial review, and after that you decide whether to continue." "There's the string." "Yes," I said. "The string is that I can't hear this and do nothing. But you control what happens next." She looked at me for a long moment. "Why does this matter so much to you?" I glanced through the office window at Ruby asleep under my coat. "Because your mother gave me help without making me small. I'm trying to remember how she did it." Grace set down the brush. "She would have told you to stop trying to repay a dead woman and pay attention to the living people in front of you." "I am paying attention." The words landed between us. Grace looked away first. The attorney's name was Priya Shah, a forensic litigator who had once stopped a landlord from forcing one of my line cooks out of his apartment. She met Grace without me present. 2 days later, Grace called and asked whether my offer still stood. "It does." Priya says the signature may have been traced from an old lease, but a scan isn't enough. "What do you need?" "The original contract, old payroll files, and someone who remembers how Walter handled documents." "Then we find them." "We?" "You said you wanted a fair chance. I have researchers and accountants. You have knowledge they don't. That sounds like a team, unless you object." She did not object. Grace led the search, calling former employees whose trust she had earned. Retired bookkeeper Clara remembered Walter replacing the scanner before Eleanor died. A driver recalled signing blank receipt forms. Assistant baker Jamal had photographs showing contracts stacked on Walter's desk. My investigators checked public records. Walter had opened 3 shell companies that billed Bell and Hearth for consulting, equipment leasing, and brand development. The addresses led to a mailbox store, an empty warehouse, and a condominium owned by his girlfriend. It looked like theft. Priya warned us that looking like theft and proving theft were different things. Walter learned about our questions before we found the original contract. He called Grace during a test bake. I heard only her side. "No, I'm not confused." A pause. "You said that after Daniel died. You said it when Ruby was diagnosed. It didn't become true because you repeated it." Another pause. Grace's face lost color. "You stay away from my daughter." She ended the call and gripped the counter. "What did he say?" I asked. "That he's worried I'm becoming unstable again." "Again?" "He told people grief made me reckless. Now he says he'll show the hospital I'm involved in financial fraud if I keep causing trouble." That would not affect Ruby's care. I know that rationally. Her voice shook once. But he knows which threat reaches me fastest. I wanted to take the phone and call Walter myself. Instead, I asked, "What do you want to do?" Grace inhaled slowly. "Keep going." That was the moment I stopped seeing her as someone I was helping and began seeing her as the person leading us through a fight I had merely joined. Our first major break came from the framed invoice in my office. Grace had taken a photograph of it for Ruby. When Priya's handwriting expert compared Eleanor's note with the scanned transfer agreement, he found a peculiar difference. Eleanor's capital B changed after a hand injury she suffered in 2010. The transfer agreement was dated 2013, but the B in Bell matched her earlier handwriting. Someone had copied the signature from an older document. The discovery was strong, but we still needed the original to test ink and pressure marks. Grace remembered that her mother kept old leases in a green fireproof cabinet in the bakery's upstairs storage room. Walter claimed the cabinet had been emptied. Clara believed he had moved its contents to a rented warehouse on Cicero Avenue. We found the warehouse through an insurance payment made by one of Walter's shell companies. Priya obtained a court order preserving the records. Before it could be served, Walter invited Grace to meet him at Bell and Hearth. "He says he wants to settle," she told me. "It's a trap." "Probably." "Then don't go." She folded her arms. "You don't get to tell me that." I had crossed the line without noticing. "You're right. I spent 4 years letting fear make decisions for me. I'm going, but not alone. Priya will be nearby, and Clara agreed to come. We'll meet during business hours." "What about Ruby?" "Her after-school program is closed. She'll sit in the upstairs office with her tablet for 20 minutes. I disliked every part of the plan, but dislike was not authority. "Let me come." "No, Walter already thinks you're buying my loyalty. I need him to hear me without you standing behind me." That answer hurt because it was true. The day before the meeting, Grace and Ruby returned with me to Milwaukee after Ruby's cardiology appointment. Beneath the framed invoice, I found an envelope I had not touched in years. Inside was the first review, the old menu, and a photograph taken by a server on the night Eleanor visited. I was in the background, thin and furious at the world. Eleanor stood near the kitchen door holding the honey almond cake. Grace sat down when she saw it. Ruby leaned over her shoulder. "That's Grandma." On the back, in my handwriting, I had written, "Stranger who saved Tuesday." Grace laughed through tears. She hated having her picture taken. I placed the photograph beside the framed recipe. She didn't just save Tuesday. Grace looked at me. The restaurant noise faded around us. "I built the company on what she gave me," I said. "Not only the recipe, the idea that hospitality begins before someone can pay for it." I forgot that for a while. I started measuring everything in margins and labor percentages. Then I heard you asking for an expiring cake. You bought the most expensive one. I've never been good at moderation. That worries me. I know. Ruby looked between us. "Are you having a grown-up moment?" "Yes," Grace said. "Should I go look at the pie?" "Yes," we said together. When Ruby left, Grace touched the edge of the photograph. "I was angry when you offered the lawyer. You had reason. I thought you wanted to turn us into proof that you were a good man. Maybe part of me did." She glanced up, surprised. "I like being useful," I said. "Sometimes too much. It lets me avoid asking whether someone actually wants me there." "And now?" "Now I'm asking." Grace's eyes held mine. "I want you there. I just don't want you in front of me. I can stand beside you. That would be new for both of us." Her hand rested on the table, close enough that I could have covered it with mine. I did not. The distance felt less like rejection and more like a promise that neither of us wanted to rush. The next afternoon, I was reviewing invoices at the downtown restaurant when Ruby called me from Grace's phone. "Mason," she whispered, "the bakery smells wrong." I stood so quickly my chair struck the wall. "Where is your mom?" "Downstairs with Uncle Walter. Clara went to get her bag. I'm upstairs. There's smoke by the door." "Listen to me. Get low. Go to the window if you can do it without crossing the smoke. Do not hide." "I'm not supposed to open the window." "You are now." I told my manager to call 911 and gave the address as I ran. The drive should have taken 20 minutes. I made it in 12 and hated every second I saved. Smoke rolled from the back of Bell and Hearth when I arrived. Customers were spilling onto the sidewalk. Grace stood near the front entrance fighting two employees who were holding her back. "Ruby's upstairs!" she screamed. Walter was nowhere in sight. The fire had started in the rear records room and climbed the old service stairs. The front staircase was already blocked by smoke. I heard sirens, but they were still distant. I had no training that made entering a burning building intelligent. I had only a child's voice in my head and the knowledge that waiting might become something I would never forgive. I wrapped my coat around my mouth and went through the neighboring shop's basement, where a maintenance corridor connected to the bakery's storage level. Heat struck hard enough to bend me. I stayed low, followed the wall, and shouted Ruby's name. A small voice answered from above. "I'm singing so you can find me." She was singing Happy Birthday, badly and bravely. I reached the upstairs office through a narrow back stairwell. Ruby crouched beneath the open window, clutching her Fox backpack. Smoke stained her face. A metal file box lay beside her. "Clara told me to keep this safe," she coughed. "Leave it." "But Mom needs it." "Your mom needs you." I lifted Ruby, wrapped her face in my shirt, and carried her toward the stairs. A section of ceiling collapsed behind us. The fire had cut off the corridor I had used. At the landing, a firefighter appeared through the smoke and guided us toward a ladder at the side window. Only after Ruby was in his arms did I see the Fox backpack still looped around my wrist. The metal file box was gone, but the backpack felt unusually heavy. Outside, Grace reached Ruby before the paramedics did. She dropped to her knees and held her without speaking. Her face had the blank terror of someone whose worst fear had almost learned her name. I sat on the curb while an oxygen mask covered my mouth. A firefighter checked burns on my hand. Ruby pulled the Fox backpack onto her lap. "I put the little computer in here," she told Grace. "Clara said Uncle Walter was taking it." Inside was an external hard drive wrapped in a bakery towel. Clara arrived with Priya moments later. She had seen Walter carry the drive from the upstairs cabinet during the argument. When smoke began pouring from the rear room, he dropped it and ran through the alley. Clara pushed it toward Ruby before going downstairs for help, never imagining the fire would reach the office so fast. Security cameras from the pharmacy across the alley showed Walter entering the rear door with a red fuel container and leaving without it. Fire investigators found traces of accelerant. The hard drive contained 7 years of accounting files, duplicate invoices, bank transfers to shell companies, and scanned versions of old contracts. One folder held the source image used to create the forged transfer agreement, an equipment lease bearing Eleanor's genuine signature from 2008. Walter had not only stolen the bakery, he had used it to move money through fake vendors, then blamed Grace for the missing funds when she questioned him. He was arrested that night at a hotel near O'Hare with cash, passports, and a one-way ticket to Montreal. The news called me a hero. I refused every interview that used the word. Firefighters had saved Ruby. Clara had protected the evidence. Grace had pursued the truth. I had made one reckless choice and been lucky enough to survive it. Grace did not speak to me for 2 days. Ruby was treated for smoke inhalation and released. I had minor burns and a bruised shoulder. I sent no flowers, no gifts, no dramatic apology. I waited. On the third evening, Grace came to my apartment carrying the Fox backpack. "You went into a fire," she said before I could invite her in. "Yes." "You could have died." "Yes." "You don't get to make yourself necessary and then gamble your life like it belongs only to you." I had expected gratitude or anger. Her sentence held something more frightening. "I didn't think," I said. "That is not comforting." "No." She stepped inside and set the backpack on my table.
Ruby keeps asking whether you'll be at her surgery.
"Do you want me there?" Grace looked down at my bandaged hand. "I am furious with you." "I know." "And grateful." "I know. And I have spent 2 days imagining what it would have felt like if you had not come back out." I did not move. She took one slow breath. "That is the part I don't know what to do with." I reached for her hand, then stopped before touching it. "May I?" Grace placed her hand in mine. It was not a confession. It was smaller and more honest. We stood in my kitchen with the city moving below the windows, holding on carefully, as if both of us understood that rescue was not the same as love, and danger was not proof of devotion. What mattered was what we chose when no emergency forced us together. The legal case moved quickly after the hard drive was authenticated. Walter's civil claims against Grace collapsed. Prosecutors charged him with arson, fraud, money laundering, forgery, and reckless endangerment. Former employees gave statements. The court appointed a receiver for Bell and Hearth, then restored Grace's ownership once the forged agreement was voided. The building itself was badly damaged. The rear storage rooms were gone, the upstairs office was blackened, and water had ruined most of the kitchen. My instinct was to rebuild everything immediately and hand Grace the keys. I did not. Instead, I asked her to write the proposal. She came to our meeting with a 12-page plan. She wanted to reopen Bell and Hearth as a neighborhood bakery and training kitchen for parents returning to work after caregiving. She wanted transparent books, an employee profit-sharing pool, and a weekly second-day shelf where safe, unsold items would be sold at low cost rather than thrown away. "No pity counter," she said. "Same quality, clear labeling, no questions asked." I read the plan twice. "How much ownership are you offering investors?" 20% total. You can take 10 if you want it. No controlling vote." I smiled. "You negotiate like a person who once called my menu a spreadsheet." It still was. We signed an agreement reviewed by separate attorneys. I invested, but Grace controlled operations, hiring, recipes, and the brand. Every term was written plainly. Help without clarity had caused enough damage in her life. Ruby's surgery was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Insurance covered most of it, and a hospital assistance program covered the remainder after Priya helped Grace complete the application. I offered to pay only once. Grace said no only once. We both respected the answer. The night before surgery, Ruby asked me to sit beside her hospital bed while Grace spoke with the anesthesiologist. "Do you think wishes work?" Ruby asked. "Sometimes they help us say what we want." "That's not the same." "No." She picked at the edge of her blanket. "My birthday wish was that Mom would stop looking scared when she thought I couldn't see." My throat tightened. "That's a big wish." "I know. I should have wished for a pony." "A pony would be complicated in the apartment." "Exactly." She looked toward the hallway. "Are you going to leave after I get better?" "No." You answered fast. I've had time to think about it. "Do you love Mom?" Children can walk through doors adults spend months pretending are walls. I care about her very much. That's not what I asked. Before I could answer, Grace returned. Ruby smiled innocently and requested ice chips. The surgery lasted 5 hours. Grace and I sat in a waiting room beneath a television neither of us watched. At one point, she rested her head against my shoulder. At another, she walked the corridor for 40 minutes. I did not tell her to be calm. I did not promise everything would be fine. I stayed. When the surgeon finally said the repair had gone well, Grace folded forward as if someone had cut the strings holding her upright. I caught her, and she cried into my shirt with relief so complete it seemed to empty years from her body. Ruby's recovery brought hard nights, medication alarms, and frightening setbacks. Bell and Hearth reopened around them. Grace divided her days between the hospital, construction plans, and the new staff. I handled vendors only when asked. Clara returned as bookkeeper and displayed the recovered drive beneath a label, "Back up your files and your courage." Grace and I did not begin with a dramatic date. We began with coffee and paper cups during Ruby's physical therapy, then dinner after a contractor meeting, then a Sunday walk along the lake when Ruby was strong enough to ride her scooter ahead of us. On that walk, Grace stopped near the water. "Ruby asked me whether you love me," she said. "She asked me too." "What did you say?" "That I care about you very much." Grace gave me a disappointed look. "Coward. I was trying not to answer before you had a choice." "I have a choice now." The wind lifted her hair across her face. I moved it gently behind her ear. "I love you," I said. "Not because your mother saved my restaurant. Not because Ruby needed a cake. Not because I want to fix what happened to you. I love the way you insist that quality and dignity are the same thing. I love that you make room for other people without surrendering your own. I love that you tell me when generosity becomes ego. And I want a life beside you, at the speed you choose." Grace looked toward Ruby, who was pretending not to listen 20 feet away. Then she turned back to me. "I love you too. But if you ever enter another burning building without firefighters, I will personally bring you back just to kill you." "That seems fair." She kissed me once, softly, while Ruby shouted, "Finally!" A year after the supermarket night, Bell and Hearth filled for Ruby's 9th birthday. Grace kept Eleanor's brick ovens but added wide windows, a teaching table, and a clearly priced second-day shelf. No one had to ask whether a cake was about to expire. Food and customers were treated with equal respect. Ruby had grown 2 inches and wore no hospital bracelet. In a silver crown, she told guests her heart was professionally repaired. Clara brought balloons, Lena a properly salted chocolate tart, and Priya a card containing no legal advice. After the guests left, Grace turned off the front lights. Only the warm lamps above the counter remained. She placed a small honey almond cake on the family table. The icing read, "For the man who helped us believe miracles still exist." I looked at her. "I thought we agreed I'm not a miracle." "You aren't," Grace said. "The miracle was that one kind act kept traveling. My mother helped you. You helped Ruby. Ruby saved the evidence. Clara saved the truth. None of us did it alone." Ruby dragged a 4th chair to the table. "There are only 3 of us," I said. "Not always," she replied. "Families need an extra chair. For visitors or bad days or somebody who has nowhere to sit." Grace's eyes met mine. I had considered proposing that evening. The ring was in my coat pocket, and the old version of me would have believed a perfect ending required producing it in front of everyone. But Grace had taught me that love was not stronger because it was displayed. It was stronger when it made room for another person's timing. So I left the ring where it was. I took Grace's hand under the table. She squeezed mine. Ruby cut the cake into 4 pieces, placing the extra slice beside the empty chair. "For whoever needs it," she said. We ate slowly in the quiet bakery. The honey tasted the same as it had on the worst Tuesday of my life and the best birthday of Ruby's. I finally understood Eleanor's lesson. A person can carry a hunger no menu reveals. For food, for dignity, for justice, for someone willing to stay. Meeting that hunger does not mean taking over another life. It means offering what you can, listening to what is actually needed, and leaving the other person with more choice than before. That is the lesson I hope Ruby carries forward. Kindness should protect dignity. Truth should be tested before rumors are believed, and real help should restore a person's power rather than replace it. We may never see how far one thoughtful act travels, but children notice what adults choose. When compassion is paired with respect, it becomes more than charity. It becomes a way of teaching courage, fairness, and responsibility without giving a lecture. It also reminds us to document agreements, question accusations, and seek evidence before allowing fear or gossip to decide another person's future. The fourth chair remained. Neighbors and tired employees used it. Months later, when I privately showed Grace the ring, she made me wait for Ruby before answering. But the memory that matters began with a woman asking for an expiring cake and a child learning her birthday was worth celebrating. If this story reminded you that generosity is strongest when it respects another person's dignity, share it with someone who once helped you stand again. Subscribe for more stories and tell me, what small kindness changed the direction of your life?